They're very reticent at investing when companies are between 1 to 5 million, what I call the death zone. Above 5 million, they're willing to open the checkbooks and put more money in order to get you to 20, 30, 50 million.
Do not leave it too late, because it actually will cost you your blood, sweat, and tears. You may end up with terrible terms that you would have never agreed to a couple of months ago.
They reach a kind of a tipping point where they need the cash to put more into marketing, but investors are loath to give them that cash because their growth rates are too low to warrant further funding. It then becomes a struggle. Something has to give.
Welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have with me the fabulous Mark Blakemore of Home Run Finance. This guy has been in the trenches with SaaS founders and SaaS companies for a long time. He helps them work out exactly what's going on and get out of something that we refer to here as the pressure stage. He calls it the SaaS death zone. It is where most don't make it. Mark, welcome to the podcast. Do you mind telling me a little bit about you, and then tell us about this SaaS death zone?
Sure, good to be here, Michael, and thanks for inviting me. So I've been a chartered accountant for over 30 odd years now, and over the last 25 years, I've been a CFO in various different types of businesses, but all around sort of technology or telecoms. Firstly, in telecoms with Kingsley Communications, but most lately for the last 20 years, I've been involved in software companies for the last 15 years of those, predominantly on the SaaS arena. So that's my specialty, my niche is what I enjoy doing, helping small growing SaaS companies getting to the next stage of their development. And yes, you referred rightly to what I call the death zone, and this is what I've just seen in many years, that initially SaaS companies can come up with a great idea and they get seed funding for that idea. And that can get them roughly to around, say, 1 million, 1.5 million of annual recurring revenue. And then at that stage, the companies then maybe start to need some further funding, maybe sort of seed A, in order to take the next step in their development. So they've reached a stage where they've got a little bit of product market fit. They've proven that what they've developed has some resonance within the market, but they've not yet established probably true full product market fit. And so when they go for that funding, that's the difficult time. Funders like going for companies that are the pre-seed stage, wanting to get the next Google or Lovable or something like that. But they're very reticent at investing when companies are between 1 to 5 million, what I call the death zone. Above 5 million, you've established product market fit and you've got a lot more resonance in the market, and funders there are willing to open the checkbooks and put more money in order to get you to 20, 30, 50 million. But between 1 and 5 million, it's very, very difficult to get funding, and that's why I call it the death zone.
Yes, you mentioned about this idea about 5 million being the sort of ARR, where in effect it's a lower risk for investors. What do you see happening in between? You mentioned the product market fit being there, sort of, but certainly 5 million being a much clearer product market fit. What kind of happens in that death zone in between for most of these companies?
So that's the struggle part for companies. So they've got to try and establish the processes, the developments of the product in such a way as to grow from 1 to 5. And if they've got sufficient funding to do it, then great. But many companies I know do struggle. They reach sort of 2, 3 maybe, and they're then growing at lower rates, maybe to 10, 15% per annum, which is okay, but it's not anything that's going to get an investor excited. They're really looking at 30%, 35% growth rates in order for them to put money in. And that's where it gets difficult for companies. They reach a kind of a tipping point where they need the cash to put more into marketing, but investors are loath to give them that cash because their growth rates are too low to warrant further funding. And it then becomes a struggle. To something has to give. and they either then sort of use that time to either sell the company and exit, but maybe at a reduced valuation, or they struggle on through. And it's really borne about by the cash constraint. If they have money to put into the next stage of development, the next stage of marketing, then great. But often they haven't got that because their growth rates are too low.
And so what I believe you're saying essentially is they run out of runway to be able to get to that next stage, whatever that next stage may be, within that sort of broad range of ARR. Is that right?
Yes, cash is critical with any growing SaaS company.
Cool. So it brings me to an interesting question, because I get asked about all the marketing and sales stuff. And the reason that I wanted to really have a great conversation with you is because you hold all the secrets to the finance side. You know what really kills these companies and the biggest mistakes they make, the things that they should be doing, but they maybe don't even know. So if you don't mind me asking you, Mark, could you throw me like 3 of the biggest financial mistakes that you see SaaS companies make on a regular basis, that you see founders make on a regular basis?
I think number one is what I would call don't believe the hype. And this was born out of an experience that I had when I first moved out of telecoms and into a small project management company, project management software company. And I was brought in as a CFO. They'd had somebody on a temporary basis who had got a permanent role somewhere else that more matched what he wanted to do. And so I was brought in by one investor who said, look, the company's in decent shape. We've just had 250K of investment put in. It was 20 years ago, so it's a little bit more than it would seem to be now. And this investor told me, I've been told that we're going to get 30-40% growth over the course of the next year based on the prospects that are seen and visible in their sales pipeline. So I thought, great. So I went in and I thought, okay, settling in, I thought I'd better check. I suppose that
Seems like a good thing to do.
these, just talk me through some of these sales prospects. Talk me, where are what the conversations have been had, where are they in the pipeline, where they're going to sign, and essentially going through that pipeline list, it became apparent very quickly that actually a lot of it was just vapor. And the sales guys who they talked to were basically putting on this list where they'd had a cozy chat with a prospect. No kind of end resonance, no compunction on the company to buy, no real intent. It was just they'd had a cozy chat and, yeah, we might do something in the future. And they put down that on this sales pipeline list.
As an opportunity.
As an opportunity and a good opportunity. And so essentially, this big long list of sales pipeline that I was told was going to support the company was kind of complete air. And by my reckoning, the company was then going to be insolvent within 4 months because of the cost base that it got. So I had to go back to the investor 2 weeks after I'd started and give him this news. And I can still recall the look on his face when I told him that. And actually, he couldn't physically speak for 10 minutes because he not only put money in himself, but he talked to some of his other angel investor friends and got them to put money in. So he had a personal obligation to some of these people. And so I was telling him the news that he was then going to have to go back to some of his fellow investors with as well. So yes, we then, after he then recovered the ability to talk, we then agreed a plan, which was essentially we had to make some immediate redundancies. The CEO, who'd also brought me in and effectively had signed off on this forecast, he also was fired, to be completely honest, asked to step down. And we kind of did an immediate restructuring of that company, which wasn't a great place for me to go into. Obviously, I'd come in, and within a month, I'm
That's
putting in
like
place
proper
a redundancy
firefighting,
program.
isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't fun. And then we had to make redundancies, and it was just before Christmas, so it was great. It was all these things compounded into one. Not my finest hour. but it was necessary in order to keep the company afloat. So that is the first thing I would say to founders, particularly if they want to believe in their product, they want to believe in these prospects, and sometimes you've got to be very dispassionate and be objective and say, is that a real prospect, or am I actually seeing what I want to see? So don't believe the hype is what I would suggest that founders sometimes can do.
Presumably, if you don't mind me asking, that situation that you just described was based on overcooked sales numbers, presumably dreamt up by salespeople who, you know, were able to suggest that a hot prospect was somebody who said, call me in a few months. In terms of going through that during Christmas and being effectively a bit like a grim reaper, I guess, the bringer of bad news, what did things look like a couple of months later? Because, from what you described, you went in, you were brought in by the CEO, he knew what he was doing in terms of bringing you in. He was then exited as a result of that process. It was right before Christmas. That must have been really stressful and really upsetting, but also essential for the business to survive. How were things a couple of months later after not believing the hype,
I
fortunately?
think they're settled down. We ran the redundancy process, and what I would say is we do run a process like that. Treat people well, treat people like human beings, and go through the process in the proper way. Don't short circuit it. Uh, there are right ways and wrong ways of going through the redundancy process, and I would strongly suggest that the right way is one where you treat people with respect and you follow the regulations that are out there. So we treated people moderately well through that process. We made it clear, look, this is a no-fault thing. We just have to cut costs. You've not done anything wrong. We'll support you in whatever way we can, in terms of getting you another job. We then sort of communicated with the staff who were remaining. This is what we're doing. We appointed a new CEO, and we effectively started again. We did a reboot, I guess. And because we'd done that and we communicated effectively, we treated people well who were exiting the business, we got the buy-in of the staff who remained.
How did you work out that it was hype, hot air? Did you just, just thinking from a founder's perspective, if they're not at a stage where they can bring in somebody like you, are there some sort of red flags that they can look out for?
Sure. I think it is talking about being dispassionate. It's really looking at where is the seller on their buying journey. Do they have a need for the product? Do they have budget? How many meetings and demonstrations of the product have you had? What is their intent to buy and their need for your product? Have you established that correctly? It's basic sales fundamentals that, to be honest, in this particular case, weren't there, and I'd put the blame on some of that to my the FD who handed over to me. I don't think he'd done his role in terms of questioning those forecasts
He believed
sufficiently.
the hype.
Yes, he didn't question it, and he's sort of right, okay, 30K, fine, let's note that down. And no questioning in terms of what I talk about. Is this a proper sales qualified opportunity? Talk me through where the buyer is on their buying journey. He hadn't done that, and neither had the CEO effectively questioned it to any degree either.
Would it be fair to say, and I'm saying this in a lovely way, salespeople tend to be very optimistic about the prospects. And so naturally, they will be the sort of people to perhaps suggest that things are going even better than they might be for their own benefits, perhaps for the team's benefit, for the company's benefit. And they may think it may be a harmless thing, but actually trying to figure out some objective measures of whether a prospect is a serious prospect versus somebody on a list, I think is a really great point.
Which is where it comes down to sales management, and in this case, the CEO hadn't done the effective sales management of those sales heads to establish that actually many of these they just weren't there, or if they were there, they weren't going to buy for 6 9 months.
That's a big one, is really not believing the hype and drilling down to the numbers. Second mistake.
A fundamental one: projecting your cash, because cash is sanity, profits is vanity, and it's been said before, but it's very true. You've got to keep a handle of your cash flow, and again, be realistic about your cash flow. What I do when I go into a business is I establish two separate cash forecasts. The first is a detailed day-by-day one for at least 3 months, which is looking at the timing of various receipts and critically the payments. The bit that trips many small companies up is two main cost elements, which is the payroll, meeting payroll at the end of the month, and maybe VAT, which is every 3 months. So if you plan out on a daily basis for the next 3 months or so, you can actually probably project down to the day the limits of your runway and when you're going to run out of cash. The other forecast I put in is looking forward 2 years as part of your overall forward-looking financial projections, P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow. I would do that for 2 years. And I'm looking there at the month-end balance that my projections throw out. The reason for that is you do not want to be in a position where you realize, say, in a month's time, that you're going to run out of cash, because by then it's too late. Your options for then securing that cash are going to be very limited. You may be in a down round. You're going to get maybe some extremely expensive financing from the bank or from other institutions. The debt equity people probably won't speak to you because it's too late for them. But if you can project probably 9 months out for when you need the cash, when your runway is going to expire, that's the time then to seek cash. It's not doing it when you're a month out.
And I think an important point that you made there is if you're uncomfortable looking at the numbers, essentially to put together a kind of short term and a long term, and look at things very, very heavily in detail in terms of the short term, but also the point you made, which I thought was really interesting, was the options to get you out of that situation should you find yourself in that situation. The longer you leave it, the more limited your options become in terms of where you can get finance, and actually the presumably at much poorer terms.
Correct.
Would that be
Yes.
fair?
That's absolutely fair.
So, founder, do not leave it too late, because it actually will cost you your blood, sweat, and tears. You may end up with terrible terms that you would have never agreed to a couple of months ago. Is that fair? Have you seen that sort of thing happen?
Yes, it's absolutely fair. And what I would also say is build in a contingency. You may have a very great model that projects you needing, say, 185k of cash at some point in time, and you may think, okay, well, I'll ask for 200. Wrong, because 15k would not be enough of a buffer in that case. You need to then sort of add on another at least 100k, depending on the size of the business, 75, 100k of cash to give you that buffer that says, okay, my projections show I need 180. In fact, I'm asking you, investor Mr. Funder, for 250 or 300 to give me that buffer that I need, because debtors will pay late. It happens all the time. Hopefully, you may get the occasional one that goes bad, but either way, paying late, yes, unfortunately, it's something that small companies suffer. They shouldn't do, but they do. So you need to have that buffer in place as well. So don't leave it too thin in terms of what your margins are.
And is there any sort of like rule of thumb for cash flow? Some people I've spoken to over the years will say, make sure that you have 6 months worth of expenses in the bank should the worst happen. Some people say 3. When you're in that exciting phase, which is, as we call it the pressure stage, you call it the death zone. It's a time when obviously, money is everything and time is everything. Is there a particular rule of thumb that you'd recommend to founders to be able to see that they've got X number of months, or is there another rule of thumb you might suggest?
Actually, you said it, 6 months. That's what I would always use in terms of have 6 months of expenses that you've always got up your sleeve. Don't be in a position where you have to sell your way out of the problem. I've come across some companies where, in order to keep the lights on, meet payroll at the end of the month, they've agreed a deal at a massive discount to what the product may be worth in order to get cash in just to meet payroll. And that's the worst position to be in. Don't try and sell your way out of the problem.
How often do you, I suppose maybe you haven't been in that situation yourself, but how often have you heard of these horror stories where founders in desperation sell themselves out of a situation? Have you come across that sort of stuff on a regular basis?
Yes, I have. Like I say, in one company that I've been involved in, they were in such a bind, like I said, just to meet payroll. Because that's fundamental. You miss payroll, you are then going to sow a whole load of trouble with your employees, who may stand by you for a few days, maybe another month or so, but essentially it's their livelihood. So they ain't going to go too far without being paid. So it's meeting payroll is fundamental. And so this one company I know, they were in such a bind that the prospect they were selling to, they agreed to for cash on that day. I think they've dropped their price by about 50 to 60% just to get the cash in to keep the lights on. Which you could say was the right thing to do because they kept the lights on. That company is now still going. However, it's a dangerous road that you run, because the next month you're going to have the same issue potentially, and before you know it, you are underselling your product compared to its true worth.
What you're sort of saying is you probably see people make decisions that are in the best interest of their team, but may only prolong the pain or postpone the pain, but also undervalue all the work they've all been doing.
Exactly.
Is that fair?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Take these tips, folks. Number 3, what is your third mistake? You mentioned don't believe the hype. Obviously, forecasting and cash flow. Number 3?
Yeah. There's maybe music to your ears, I think, but it's what I have
Marketing.
seen is, yes, it is. People stop marketing spend when times get tough. And I have been there and done this. I get the attraction. You've got a cash situation coming up. You need to make cuts, and you look around at what is the easiest thing to cut. And yes, at that time, marketing spend is the easiest thing to cut, primarily because it's not the avenue that gives you the immediate benefits. It's removing some pain, but it's going to cause you a whole lot of pain down the road. The thing about marketing is it affects you 6 months later. So you can cut marketing costs, be that salaries, be that overheads or events that you pull out of, or whatever it is, and you don't feel any immediate pain. You've got the games, you've got the costs, but you don't feel any immediate pain. Your sales don't drop off. And it seems easy. Why are we spending this money on marketing? Where it affects you is 6-9 months down the road, when you suddenly realize, my pipeline's going down. Why is that? And why we're not getting the number of leads in that we used to. And it's essentially because of that decision you took 6-9 months before, when you cut the marketing spend. I understand the attraction. I fundamentally get it. And if the patient is bleeding, you do what you can to stop the bleeding, but it will have long-term consequences. So I would urge you as far as possible, in conjunction with all the other things that I've talked about, which is looking after your cash and don't believe in the hype, try and safeguard your marketing, or some semblance of your marketing operation, if you're in that situation where you do have to cut costs.
I naturally will agree with you. And actually, I think you made a really good point, which is you're not going to feel the pain now necessarily, or even tomorrow, but in 6 months, 9 months time. And I've seen it with clients of ours over the years, where they come back a year later and say, we really need your help. By that point, it's a bit like starting training for a marathon all over again. You're back to square one. You've got to try and build things up again. And Yeah, it's an easy thing to do. It's an easy choice to make, as you say. But the interesting thing that you see, and I'm just going to add to your point, is in times of economic strife, low consumer confidence, low consumer spending, businesses cut back, but often the ones that continue to market despite that are marketing in a much less noisy space. So there's also a net benefit that you can gain more share of your individual market in times where maybe things and it may be an overall industry or economy reason or factor that is sort of affecting your marketing and sales efforts now, but it also is an opportunity. Now, I'm naturally going to say that. So you can say to yourself, I'm naturally going to say that. But I agree with you. Most people make this decision too quickly and then pay for it down the line.
I think there is a time with SaaS companies where you may have to sort of, if you've got avenues of costs that you've got to cut, a better position might be to say, okay, we're going to slow down the development of certain features that you're looking to put in, or you should consider, well, actually, do we need those features? Are they actually going to expand our TAM to any great degree? And I would probably urge SaaS companies to think far more about, do I just slow down development and consider other areas of cost cuts, maybe before marketing. I think marketing has to take that bit of the pain, maybe, if you're in that situation. But when I've seen this being done and marketing has been slashed to too great a degree, it doesn't end well. It causes you a lot of pain down the line.
It's a really interesting point you make. This kind of leads into a tangential number 4, which is you talked about the idea of looking at the product roadmap, the features, and being in a situation where you know, in time where times are good and cash is flush. You'll probably agree with this. I'm also happy for you to disagree. When cash is flush, when times are good, when confidence is high, when hype is strong, there is a huge investment in more features, more features, more features. Now, truthfully, in those times, probably not the best features are chosen. They might be the ones that people in the development team are most excited about. We're human beings. And it could also be true that focusing on what you're really great at as a SaaS company is also a useful thing to do. So kind of touching on your point there, focus your energies and your finance on features that are going to shift the needle or move the needle, sorry, rather than and maybe times of being a bit more lean give you an opportunity to do that. Would that be fair? Is there anything that you might add to that, or totally
I would
disagree if
agree.
I'm wrong?
And also, I was in one situation once where we opened it out to the developers into like, what do you guys want to develop? And that was a mistake because they came up with some really wacky stuff, and this was a Russian firm, Russian developers, and they want to develop stuff like Facebook applications, which had no resonance to the product at all, had no relevance. It was because they thought it was quite interesting and it was, the tech was quite involved and they quite enjoyed doing it. But we were going to do a development based on what they personally were interested in, rather than what was going to develop the product to a greater degree that would help us to sell it more. And so you do have to, I would suggest you establish what those features are and make sure you're doing it because there is a compelling need, there is a sufficient need within your customer base. It's going to expand your your TAM to a good degree. You're not doing it just because one customer thinks it's a really nice thing to do. Because if you're not able to resell it, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah, custom features are a SaaS killer as well. Adding loads of custom functionality, which actually brings me to a key point. So, Mark, when you and I first sat down and spoke, you talked about yourself as the cynical FD, which I love. So, let's talk about the classic tension. I see it, you see it. The CEO and the CMO may want to spend. The CFO wants to keep control of things and make sure things don't get out of control. From your cynical FD perspective, how do you help a founder prove marketing ROI and grow to a skeptical board in that situation where you got that tension with the CEO, the CMO versus the CFO?
I'm not that cynical, actually. I'm kind of taking the view that, no, I want to believe. Show me. Have you heard of a guy called John Wanamaker?
No,
You
I
may
will
not have.
Google
Okay,
him.
so John Wanamaker was an American industrialist in the 19th century. You will be aware of his quote, famous quote, which is, "Look, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted." The trouble is, I
I
don't
just
know
don't
which
know
half.
which half. Is that
Yeah,
the one?
so you know the
Yeah,
quote, but you didn't know
yeah.
who said it. John Wanamaker. Um, and I kind of take the same view. Look, marketing has this attribution problem of identifying which wins come from which particular marketing avenues. And you just have to be very realistic, I think, with that. And as far as you can within a SaaS company, you have to go down that attribution route and try and find out, okay, what has worked. Bearing in mind you have to have a balance of marketing activities. I am now more convinced than I ever have been of the value of brand. I think earlier in my career I was a bit dismissive of it, but I do understand it now. And the fact that you've established a brand, you've established a presence in the market, you've established a little bit of longevity, actually that counts as something, to be honest. So I do understand that. However, I do draw the line at some events where you have the capacity to spend an awful lot of money and not get any immediate value. And if you come out of that with no real leads and it's what was good for band building, that really isn't sufficient in itself. So I think I take the view, I want to believe, now show me why that event will bring this in. What did we do last year at that event? And if the answer is, well, not a lot. So what's going to happen this year is going to be different. Um, what is that? What has that SEO spend given us in the past? And therefore, is it something that's proven and therefore we should do more of? Or is it not proven and actually it's not? We're guessing, we're hoping, rather than actually any real defined strategy and thought gone into it.
You talked about the idea of attribution. It's a tough one. It is a tough one because inevitably there are kind of contributors, i.e., they may have seen you in 15 different places, and then there are decision makers. And from an FD's perspective, and what I mean by that is that you see loads of things and it's like, oh, they're there, and it kind of subtly influences things. It could be at an event, for example, or anything, right? There can be little touch points along the way. And then, of course, there's the time where they go, do you know what? I'm ready now. And there's kind of two components to that, right? I knew who you were. I knew what you offered. Three components, and I knew how to find you. And that's a journey. And when it's interesting when you talk about the journey and sales and certainly marketing. What's your sort of number one red flag from a finance perspective in terms of that marketing element? Is it because you touched on the idea of spending money at events, SEO, et cetera, et cetera. From a purely financial perspective, is it that you're suggesting that kind of looking at perhaps like, is this proven what happened last year versus this year? Given how fast technology is moving, is there a particular thing that you could suggest that founders look at? I won't take it personally as a marketer. I'm just intrigued what your side of the table looks at.
I think what I'm doing when I'm questioning the CMO on items like that, it's it it's trying to ascertain, okay, you're suggesting this, but are they coming across more of, I hope this activity works, rather than my recommendation is that this will work. If I'm sensing more hope than belief, I'm going to query it. And that's when I really do it. So it's really looking at the CMO, asking detailed questions. Okay, so you want to attend that event. What's the footfall of that event? And then, okay, well, the footfall's quite good. Okay, great. But who are the attendees going to be? Are they the kind of, are they in our ICP of our products buyers? Because if they're not, why are we going? and it's really digging into that and asking the questions so that the CMO effectively does their homework before they come and request the cat, before they request the funding for that. So you're establishing a discipline whereby, okay, I know my CFO is going to ask me about this, this, and this, so I'm going to do that homework in advance, and then they come prepared.
CMOs, be prepared for Mark to walk through that door and ask you all those questions. Prepare well. Look, Mark, I know this time's running out here. What I wanted to do was just do a really good wrap up, something that our founder friends can take away from this. If you could give a founder right now who's firefighting, and most of them are, especially technical founders, are firefighting in silence, what's one piece of common sense financial discipline that they might have overlooked that could really help them in that situation?
This is a difficult one because it involves spending money in one sense, so it may not seem like common sense, and I do understand sometimes that's going to be a very difficult ask. But when you're firefighting, quite often as a founder, you are then going into areas that you are not a specialist in. And founders do generally a great job. Their background may be in tech, it may be in sales, maybe in marketing. But then when you're a founder, you then wear other hats. You go into these other areas, you go into HR, you go into finance, you go into marketing maybe, and you step out your comfort zone, but it's not your specialist area. And sometimes what you need to do as a founder is go back to what you're good at, be that tech, be that marketing, be that sales. In my experience, it's really finance actually, and hire a specialist. It may be on a fractional basis. It may be that you can appoint a full-time person, but what I suggest is outsource what you are not a specialist in, and consider that. I know one company I worked at was founded by three extraordinarily talented developers, and they found this product. It was a great product. It became a company, but they realized early on, actually, we are not good at managing. We are not good at sales or marketing, nor is it our core interest. We want to develop. We want to code because that's what interests us, is what we're good at. And they took that stance where they said, we're going to step back from, quote, running the company. They still owned a lot of it, but they stood back from running the company because they recognized it wasn't their core specialty. So I would recommend that founders sometimes need to step back and say, do I actually need to hire, maybe on a fractional basis, an experienced CMO, CFO, etc.?
Very, very good advice. I mean, this is kind of what makes me sick about hustle culture these days, is the idea that you've got to be great at everything and everybody else is doing fabulously and you are not, and yada, yada, yada. I hear it all the time where they think that something they've seen on social media or wherever it may be is even true. Like, I'm a founder. I built, up to 1 million ARR in 2 weeks, all that stuff. And I think your advice here is that fundamentally we need to focus on what we're good at. And I agree with that massively. It's not the sexy social media clippable advice, but it's true. As in, do what you're good at, enjoy what you do, find people who are the same at the areas of weakness. I know you quoted somebody earlier with the quote that I knew, but I didn't know who they were, and I will look them up. But Steve Jobs, of course, talked about getting a bunch of brilliant people around you. He built a fabulous company. He brought it from the brink multiple times. And they produce great products. Whether you love them or not, they are innovative, unique products. And he often talked about that idea, bringing around the people who are smarter than you.
I think there's a lot
the
to be
areas.
said for that.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of George Bush Jr., who, in fairness to him, and he'd probably admit this himself, wasn't the most intellectual of US presidents. But what he did do very well was he recognized where his weaknesses were, and he appointed some very strong people around him, like Colin Powell or Condoleezza Rice. And so he brought these people who are experts in their field to support him in his presidency. because he recognized that very thing.
Ultimately, that advice is fantastic. It's brilliant because it's so practical. And look, Mark, this has been incredibly clarifying. The big takeaway for me personally isn't about saying no to everything. It's about putting the financial, you talked about sanity versus vanity, and I think that was clear through everything you said today, unless of course you disagree with me. I thought it was very, very, very helpful to get people to put their sensible hat on, and whether that's, not believing the hype, obviously projecting forward, and thirdly, not cutting off things too quickly. And of course, as you just mentioned, hire specialists where you're not so great. Focus on what you're great at. Thank you, Mark. In terms of if founders are stuck in the death zone themselves and need someone to help, what is the best way to reach you? And by the way, I'll pop all of Mark's information in the show notes.
Sure. So you can look me up on LinkedIn. I mean, you should be able to find me there. My name is Mark Blakemore. I post quite regularly, so you can look me up on there. I have a website which is www.homerunfinance.co.uk, and you can always reach me on mark@homerunfinance.co.uk as well.
And I will pop all of that in the show notes. If you're currently strolling around a park or on a treadmill and don't have anything to write down, I'll have all Mark's information in there. It's homerunfinance.co.uk. And this has been Mark Blakemore. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.